September 2022. Hurricane Fiona has just torn across Puerto Rico, leaving a trail of devastation. The island is dark, a total blackout. Power plants are shutting down, desperate for the diesel fuel needed to bring the grid back to life. And just off the coast, a ship sits waiting. The Times GH Parks. On board are 300,000 barrels of diesel, a lifeline. But the ship can't dock. For days, it idled in international waters. Governor Pedro Pierluisi made frantic public pleas. Officials in San Juan begged Washington for help. The fuel was right there, visible from the shore, but it couldn't be delivered. Because the ship, though owned by an American company, was flying the flag of the Marshall Islands. It was a foreign vessel. And a century-old law stood in the way. This is why, for millions of Americans, everything is more expensive. This single, dramatic incident reveals a hidden reality for anyone living in Hawaii, Alaska, Guam, and Puerto Rico. It's an invisible tax baked into the price of milk, cars, building materials, and even life-saving fuel. So what is this law? Why does a rule designed for a bygone era have the power to block a rescue mission in the 21st century? To understand this, you have to understand the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, better known as the Jones Act. This is the story of how a law, passed with the patriotic goal of securing America's national defense, created a permanent shipping monopoly. A monopoly that was supposed to guarantee a powerful shipbuilding industry for wartime, but instead, ironically, decimated it by shielding it from all competition. This is how a strategic decision made in the age of steamships directly causes the inflated cost of living on American islands today. This isn't a simple story of corporate greed or government incompetence. It's a story about unintended consequences. It's about how the ghost of an old idea, the fear of losing control of the seas, led to a fortress of protectionism, a fortress so strong it can't be dismantled, even when it's hurting our own citizens. To see how it was built, we have to go back further, to a time before the law was even written, to meet the man whose ideas convinced a generation of leaders that controlling the waves was the only path to greatness. That ship was stuck offshore because of an idea, a powerful, seductive idea born in the mind of a man who was more a scholar than a sailor, Admiral Alfred Thayer Mahan. Mahan was a historian at the Naval War College in the late 19th century, and he was consumed by a single question: what makes a nation truly great? His answer, published in 1890, was a book that would become the Bible for a generation of American leaders. It was called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. Mahan's argument was strategically simple and profoundly consequential. He argued that national greatness wasn't won on land, it was won at sea. He looked at the British Empire, a tiny island that controlled a quarter of the globe, and saw a blueprint. Because of Mahan, American leaders began to see sea power as a three-legged stool. First, you need a powerful blue water navy. Second, you need a global network of naval bases and coaling stations. And third, the leg everyone forgets but is arguably the most important. You need a large, thriving domestic shipping industry, a merchant marine. This wasn't about economics for Mahan, it was about national security. He saw the merchant marine as the Navy's reserve. Its ships could be converted to transport troops and supplies in wartime. Its civilian sailors were the trained pool of manpower needed to crew an expanded fleet. Without a merchant marine built, owned, and crewed by Americans, the other two legs of the stool were useless. A navy without a logistics train is just a collection of very expensive, very stationary forts. This is the idea that created the political climate for the Jones Act. Mahan's ghost convinced men like Theodore Roosevelt that a protected merchant fleet wasn't a choice. It was an absolute necessity for national survival. Mahan's ideas were a powerful blueprint for empire, but a blueprint is useless until you try to build the house. The First World War was the test, and America failed spectacularly. This failure is the direct reason your groceries cost more in Honolulu. When the United States entered the war in 1917, President Woodrow Wilson faced a terrifying logistical reality. America had a powerful navy, just as Mahan had advised. It had millions of soldiers ready to fight. But the third leg of the stool, the merchant marine, was gone. For decades, it had been cheaper for American companies to use foreign ships, so the domestic fleet had withered into insignificance. Suddenly, the nation was caught unprepared. How do you move an army across an ocean with no ships? The crisis was immediate and humiliating. The government had to seize German ships that were trapped in U.S. ports when the war began. They had to practically beg their British allies, already stretched to the breaking point, to lease them transports. A desperate, frantic shipbuilding program was launched, but it was too little, too late. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a profound strategic vulnerability. America's ability to project power was held hostage by its lack of simple cargo ships, the U-hauls of the sea. This wartime logistics crisis burned a lesson into the minds of an entire generation of politicians. The theories of sea power were no longer abstract. The ghost of Mahan was now pointing to a real, tangible failure that had nearly crippled the war effort. Because of this chaos, Congress came to believe that national security demanded a permanent solution. They were determined that America would never be caught unprepared again. The war was over, but the fear it created was a powerful political weapon. The memory of ships being begged, borrowed, and seized was still fresh. Into this moment of national anxiety stepped the man who would build the system that governs American waters to this day. His name was Wesley L. Jones. Jones was a Republican senator from the state of Washington, and he was the perfect man for the moment. He was a fierce nationalist who believed deeply in Mahan's vision of American self-sufficiency. But his motives were not purely ideological. His home state was home to the massive shipyards of Seattle and Tacoma. For Jones, a law protecting American shipping was a calculated fusion of national security doctrine and home state economics. It was a way to keep America safe while keeping his voters employed. This is why he drafted the Merchant Marine Act of 1922. It was not a subsidy, it was a fortress. The law, which would eventually bear his name as the Jones Act, was strategically simple and brutally effective. Jones designed a closed loop, an economic fortress that no foreign competitor could ever breach. He declared that any and all goods shipped between two American ports, from New York to Boston, from Los Angeles to Honolulu, had to move on a ship that met three strict requirements. It had to be built in America, owned by Americans, and crewed by Americans. With this single piece of legislation, Senator Jones created a permanent, protected monopoly for the domestic shipping industry. He was solving the crisis of World War I. He was ensuring a reserve of ships and sailors would always be ready for the next war. What he couldn't see, what nobody saw, was that in building a fortress to protect the nation, he was also building a cage around its islands. The fortress Senator Jones designed was elegant in its simplicity. It wasn't a complex web of tariffs or subsidies. It was a lock, and the law he wrote, the Jones Act, provided 4 keys that a ship had to possess to open it. These became known as the 4 pillars of protection. First, the ship had to be built in an American shipyard. This was the foundation. Jones's logic was direct. To have ships ready for war, you must have shipyards ready to build them. This pillar guaranteed a constant, non-negotiable demand for American naval construction, keeping the docks in his home state of Washington, and across the country, humming with work. Second, the ship had to be owned by American citizens. This was a calculated move to prevent foreign interests from controlling U.S. domestic supply lines through shell corporations. It ensured that the profits, and more importantly the loyalties, of the shipping industry remained firmly on American soil. Third, the vessel had to fly an American flag, meaning it was registered in the United States and subject to its laws. Think of this as its passport. This pillar kept the fleet under U.S. legal jurisdiction, making it easy for the government to requisition the ships in a time of national emergency. And finally, the ship had to be crewed primarily by American citizens. This was the human element. The act was designed to create a permanent, deep pool of experienced American mariners, a naval reserve in all but name, ready to answer the call. These 4 pillars, working in concert, created a closed loop, a perfectly sealed economic ecosystem. It was designed to be an unsinkable fleet, a perpetual motion machine for maritime power. But what Senator Jones didn't foresee was that a system with no way for competition to get in also had no way for inefficiency to get out. The Jones Act was supposed to make American shipbuilding strong. Instead, it made it comfortable. And in the brutal world of global economics, comfort is a slow death. The law's protectionism created the very weakness it was meant to prevent. This is the central, tragic irony of the Jones Act. Think about it. If you are the only company legally allowed to build a product, why would you ever invest in making it cheaper or better? you have a captive market. This is exactly what happened to American shipyards. Shielded from the hyper-efficient builders in Japan, South Korea, and later China, they had no incentive to innovate, no pressure to control costs. They were building ships for a guaranteed customer base that had nowhere else to go. This created a devastating feedback loop. Because the shipyards could charge exorbitant prices, the cost of a new American-made vessel skyrocketed. Today, a Jones Act-compliant ship can cost 4 to 5 times more than an identical vessel built in a foreign yard. This staggering price tag meant shipping companies couldn't afford to modernize their fleets. They kept their old, inefficient ships in service for decades longer than their international competitors. The result was a U.S. domestic fleet that became a floating museum. It was old, it was small, and it was breathtakingly expensive to operate. The fortress Senator Jones had built to nurture a powerful industry had become a gilded cage, trapping it in a state of arrested development. The industry was safe from the world, but it was also cut off from it. And for the Americans living on islands inside that cage, the price of that protection was about to come due. That price was about to come due because of a simple, brutal fact of geography. For Americans on the mainland, the Jones Act was a distortion, an inefficiency. But for those on islands, it was a wall. Think about it. If a Jones Act-compliant ship is too expensive to move cargo from New Jersey to Florida, a company has other options. They can use a truck. They can use a train. The market, however distorted, still provides an escape valve. Competition, the very force the Jones Act was designed to suppress, still exists on land. But what if you live in Honolulu or San Juan? What is your alternative? There is no highway from Los Angeles to Oahu. There is no railway from Miami to Puerto Rico. This is the critical vulnerability that turns the law from a mere protectionist policy into an inescapable economic siege. Because of the Jones Act, a foreign ship carrying goods from Japan to California cannot legally make a stop in Hawaii to drop off cargo. It must sail past the island, unload everything in a mainland port like Long Beach, where those same goods are then reloaded onto an expensive, American-crewed Jones Act ship to be sent all the way back across the Pacific. This is the reality that governors like Hawaii's Josh Green and Puerto Rico's Pedro Pierluisi confront every single day. They govern American citizens trapped in a logistical labyrinth built a century ago. They see how this one law inflates the cost of everything their people need to live, from building materials for homes to basic groceries. The fortress Senator Jones, built to protect the nation's shipping lanes, had, for its island citizens, locked them out of the global economy. The only road in or out is water, and the law says only the most expensive ships in the world are allowed to travel it. So how does the higher cost of that ship translate to the price of a gallon of milk in Maui? The mechanism is simple, direct, and ruthless. Cost pass-through. For the executive running a Jones Act shipping line, the math is calculated and straightforward. The ship itself cost 4 times what his international competitor paid. His American crew costs significantly more. His older vessel burns more fuel. These are not his problems to absorb. They are business costs to be passed on. Every single one of these inflated expenses is baked into the price he charges to move a container from the mainland to the island. He can do this with confidence. Why? Because his customers have nowhere else to go. This is the final step in the chain. The shipping company charges the distributor in San Juan a premium to transport food. The distributor, to stay in business, passes that cost on to the local grocery store. The grocery store then marks up the price on the shelf. The result is an invisible tax on everything. It's not a line item on your receipt. It's a silent surcharge woven into the very fabric of the island economy. It's why a new car, a sheet of plywood, or a box of cereal carries a hidden financial burden that a citizen in Ohio or Texas never has to pay. This isn't just about luxury goods. It's about the essentials of life. It's a constant, downward pressure on the purchasing power of every family. The National Security Strategy of 1920 has become a permanent cost of living crisis in 2024. Paid for at the checkout counter, one grocery bill at a time. The National Security Strategy of 1920 has become a permanent cost of living crisis in 2024, paid for at the checkout counter, one grocery bill at a time. This raises the final, most crucial question. If the Jones Act has failed to create a robust merchant marine, if it has decimated the shipbuilding industry it was meant to protect, and if it actively harms millions of American citizens every single day, Why is it still the law? The answer is not found in grand theories of national security, but in a simple, brutal political calculation. It's the principle of concentrated benefits versus diffuse costs. For a modern shipping executive whose company operates a handful of Jones Act vessels, this law is not an abstract policy. It is a government-granted monopoly. It is the bedrock of his entire business model, guaranteeing millions in profits by law. His motivation to protect it is absolute and existential. He will fund lobbyists. He will make campaign contributions. He will ensure every politician on a relevant committee knows his name and understands the consequences of reform. The benefit to him is concentrated, massive, and worth fighting for. But what about the cost? For the family in Honolulu or San Juan, the cost is diffused. It's an extra $1 on milk, an extra $5 on a t-shirt, an extra $1,000 on a car. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. The pain is real, but it's spread across millions of people, a silent tax woven so deeply into the economy that many don't even know its name. Organizing a political movement against a slightly higher grocery bill is nearly impossible. This is the political battlefield. On one side, a few highly motivated, well-funded, and laser-focused players. On the other, millions of disorganized citizens who are just trying to make ends meet. Because of this strategic imbalance, the law survives. It has become an unmovable object. Not because it's effective, but because the handful of people who profit from it wield more political leverage than the millions who pay for it. The fortress Senator Jones, built to protect America from foreign threats, has become a cage for its own people, with the keys held by the very industry it was meant to foster. 100 years later, the ghost of sea power still haunts the aisles of every grocery store in America's islands, a testament to how a solution from one century can become the unsolvable problem of the next. If you found this eye-opening, hit subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden causes, and leave a comment. Were you aware of the Jones Act and its impact before watching this?